Okay, start by telling me your name
My name is Kathleen.
and what do you do?
I am a child protective service worker.
So, can you think of a situation where you were challenged in your role and had to affect change in leadership in several different ways? Like your leader, your supervisor, the people below you, coworkers around you. Tell me about that situation.
Those situations happen very often with what I do. We have to take things very seriously with what I do because any decisions that we make is life decisions. Exactly what I do is I go in and I help families. I help the children, and if it's not a safe environment, I have to pull these kids out of the home. So when you pull these kids out of the home, you don't know where they're going to go. You don't know if it's going to be a worse situation. So we can't predict that. So all these decisions cannot be taken lightly. And it takes a lot of people to make these decisions. And of course, we're all human. And with human nature comes with disagreements sometimes. And it happens very often because we all want what's best for these kids and what's best for the family. But it does come often. Specifically, I had a case, let me think, because I get a lot of them. I had a case a while back where I had a father and he was high on methamphetamines. And when I did a tour of the home, I found probably an arsenal of weapons in the house. I found a crack pipe, found drugs in the home, and I had older children. And I remember calling our attorneys, because that's who we have to call, and let them know what I had found. And I wanted to take the children out of the home. The attorneys did not want to do that because the children were older. They were teenagers. And they had said to me, well, they're teenagers. How are they in danger right now? They can call 911. They would be okay.
They can run away.
They can run away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They can get a neighbor. Whatever it is.
Sure.
But here's the situation is when I sat down and talked to these kids, they were scared to be there.
Mm.
They had told me that, when their dad gets mad, when he's high, which is very frequently, and at that time he was high, he will take his weapons and he will shoot them in the air. And what comes up has to come down. Yeah. And I couldn't risk at that moment of him having an outrage because already CPS was there. Nobody wants CPS at their door.
You can't risk him shooting those kids, right?
No.
Right.
And so the kids were crying. They wanted to leave. So there's always that part of, okay, if I take them, where am I going to put them? That's a part you always have to think about. But the other part is the attorneys was like, didn't see the immediate need for it. And I really had to articulate how bad these kids didn't want to be there.
Mm.
And they were scared for their lives. And I really had to influence her.
Yeah. So, how were you able to convince the attorneys to give you the order for removal?
I really talked about the children and their feelings. Because when it comes to older kids, I'm very transparent. You have to be honest. You have to be transparent. Because when you go to the foster care system, there's so many unknowns. There really is. You are putting these children out. They're going to a different school. And you don't know how many schools they're going to go to afterwards.
They can probably see through BS a mile away too, can't they? These kids know when you're lying to them.
Yes.
Probably.
Yes.
Yeah. What about, did you have any coworkers with you at this point?
I did.
Yeah. Was it someone that had been on the job for very long? Or like a newer CPS caseworker?
She was a newer worker.
Mm.
This was actually her first time she was in that situation.
And how were you able to kind of lead her through that as an example?
First of all, I trained her. And this was kind of her first or second week on her own. So she was terrified. But the good thing is about it is when I was training her, I always explain to her it's better in pairs. And if you ever come up with a circumstance or situation you're uncomfortable with, it's okay to call me.
Mm-hmm.
Or okay to call somebody else.
Yeah.
So I think that was the first thing, is that there was that communication of calling and helping each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, once I got there, we were able to work through it. She was unaware of some of the danger signs and stuff like that, but that comes with time because she doesn't know what drug paraphernalia looks like. But again, all that kind of stuff comes in time. And talking to the kids, she didn't really, because she was uncomfortable herself, she was uncomfortable asking these kids these questions. How do
The very frank questions, right?
Right. Because oftentimes you don't want to bring up discomfort or uncomfortable. I call them courageous conversations, right? But the thing is if you don't work through those conversations, you're never going to know the truth.
Yeah.
You need the transparency.
Yeah.
And so she really got to learn by sitting down and talking to these kids, what is it you need from me? How can I make your life better today? How are you going to feel safe? Where do you want to sleep tonight?
Yeah.
And if I take you with me, I'm going to tell you, I don't know where I'm going to put you tonight. But I do know you don't have to worry about somebody shooting you. So it was able to sit down and talk to these kids so they can let their guard and emotions down and they can talk. And they cried. Of course they cried. Because I allowed them that safe space.
Yep.
And so she learned how to do that.
And then, so as far as the end of the situation went, ultimately, had this dad done anything that was a really alarming warning sign that, you know, ultimately ended up in the police coming there? And what was the outcome for the children at the end of that day?
There was actually a warning sign. When I did first get there, I could tell he was high because I know what the warning sign looks like. And if you don't know about meth, but it does make you angry. It can make you erratically act out. It can cause paranoia, and it can happen really quick. Sometimes they don't sleep for days, so you don't really know what's going to happen. But I could tell in his eyes they were glossy, his pupils were huge. And then this is what he did, is he went and he locked himself in the garage. And at that point, you know, they always say, trust your gut. And it is a very true thing. When you are in situations like that and your gut is speaking to you, you listen. You listen to it. And by him locking himself in the garage, it's not normal behavior. I mean, being high on meth is not normal behavior. But, you know, going in there and like barricading yourself or something like that, like who knows, you know, he could have started seeing things. I have seen people jump off second story balconies because they've seen things before. See electronic birds. Yeah, all kinds of things. So when he did that, I'm like, I don't know what's happening behind those closed doors. And at the time I didn't know what was behind those closed doors.
Right.
But I knew something wasn't right.
Yeah.
And I called law enforcement. And sure enough, there was drugs and there was an arsenal of weapons. So we did remove the children.
And they ended up safe.
They ended up safe. Yeah.
That's great. It's a good outcome. Well, thank you for sitting with me for this interview.
You're welcome.
Any questions for me?
No.
Thanks.